We are living through uncertain times. And I will share with you that um, uncertainty is one of the hardest things for a human being to experience because even when something is very, very serious and terribly scary, even dangerous, we instinctually know how to react. But when times are uncertain, like they are during the pandemic, we feel less comfortable because we feel as if danger could be coming from any direction and we don't know how to sort out our thoughts and our feelings. So we, humanity, we as Americans are having a common experience. We are all living through higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of worry, and higher levels of uncertainty. Here's the good news. The good news is that every emotion we have and every experience we have is an opportunity to build resilience. Because if we learn from our experiences and are able to pass them along to our children, then our children will learn to be able to not just bounce from difficult times that they'll have in the future, but also learn how to get the most out of life, how to thrive even in the best of times. So let's begin. Our children are watching us. And resilience lessons are not best taught by telling children step one, step two, step three. Resilience lessons are actually learned best when we model how to be resilient and when we react to the feelings that they're having in a way that will reinforce their own resilience. Let's begin with what I think is by far the most important thing that we can do right now, and that is acknowledge the emotions, even celebrate them, elevate them. This is an opportunity for our society, let alone your family, but for all of us to recognize that emotions are something to be had and they are something to be experienced and they are something to be processed. And when you reach out to other people to process those emotions, and when you look to other people for support, we all thrive. And this is so different than the way many of us grew up, where we were told in some way, either literally told or received the message that having emotions was a sign of weakness. Now I think this is an amazing opportunity to build resilience in our whole nation by acknowledging we're having a shared experience and together we will get past it. Next, almost all good parents feel like they're failing now, right? Because you got so good at juggling all the different things you were juggling, right? And now almost nobody can do everything that they want to do. Not only are you having to pay the bills and take care of the kids, but many of us have had experience of having to be the teachers at home and worrying about society and worrying about our elderly parents and grandparents and vulnerable people in the community. There are so many things going on that we all feel like we're failing. What's the resilience lesson here? The resilience lesson here is to learn to be compassionate with yourself, self-forgiving, to give yourself a break just as you would give someone else a break. Our kids are watching us. If they learn that we can forgive ourselves and love ourselves even when we're not living up to our own expectations, they too will learn how to bounce when they find themselves in a similar situation. Next, one of the most important things for a human being to be resilient is to have empathy for other human beings, to connect with other human beings, to imagine what they might be feeling. And again, you can't say to your child, be empathetic, it's a good thing. The best way for your children to learn empathy is to experience empathy. So now is a great time for us to be empathetic for our kids. It's no secret that in many ways young people are suffering, maybe even more than adults. And it's so easy to be an adult and say, what is happening here? You're not working. You're not worried about this person's illness, right? Or keeping a roof over our head. All you have to do is go to school. What's going on here? It's so easy for us to forget why this is particularly hard for teenagers. Adolescence is about learning to have increasing freedoms, to test limits, to push boundaries. They're natural experimenters so they can grow, right? And here, during COVID, we are actually limiting people, telling them what they can and what they can't do. So of course, when we are trying to keep them in a box, it's going to be harder for teenagers whose brains are literally wired to expand their limits. You know what else their brains are wired for? Social connection, right? To be with friends. Sometimes this can be maddening, but I want to remind you that ultimately this is how you're going to get grandchildren, right? I said ultimately, not now, right? So it is for them to become social. This is how eventually they're going to learn to enter the work world or one of the services and not live in the home forever. They have to be able to work with their peers. And now we are saying to them, stay away from your peers, stay in your pod. It is against their brain development. So for us to understand why it's hard for our teens, to be empathetic with them is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to create sanctuary in our homes. It's going to take away a lot of fighting. Number two, it's going to be saying that emotions are okay to have. And I think I can even understand why you're having emotions. And maybe most importantly, they're going to experience empathy and therefore they're going to be able to live it. The next emotion that many of us are having is we're feeling helpless, right? You're just not able to do so many things that you used to be able to do. You're not able to juggle all of those balls, right? Human beings are good at juggling 2 or 3 balls. We all do that. Work world, personal world, many different balls that we're juggling. And now what's happened in 2020 and 21 is people are adding extra balls and suddenly there's 4 or 5 and you can barely keep them up. And some of them are dropping on the ground. That's what's happening to all of us. We're not able to keep up. This is an amazing opportunity to learn what you can do and learn what maybe you shouldn't be doing. So I'm going to want you to learn to look in 2 different directions. First, look up. Look at the balls that you are still juggling in the air. Which ones have stayed up? There's a very good chance you're going to learn what your priorities really are, what is worth focusing on, and what are the greatest values you could possibly have. And your children will learn those values from you. What's the next thing you do? Look down at the ground. There's a very good chance that some of those balls that are sitting on the ground didn't need to be up in the air in the first place. And we were just wasting our time and energy on things that didn't matter. Maybe we can begin focusing again. Next, learn to live in the present. You know, what human beings do is we have what's called catastrophic thinking. Why? Because uncertainty is terrifying. We don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to go. Maybe this could happen. Maybe that could happen. I really don't know. So what do we naturally do? We begin imagining the worst. Because then you say, if I imagine the worst, I can handle everything, anything. But that's not true. What actually happens when you imagine the worst is you begin living in that reality. So when you make a mountain out of a molehill, or you imagine catastrophe that hasn't happened, but you keep playing it out in your mind in what is literally called catastrophic thinking, then what happens is that you begin living in that reality, always with tension, always with worry. That affects your body, it affects your health, and it also prevents you from focusing on what you can change. Because if you're imagining the worst, you're not living in reality and therefore not focusing on what you can change. So you have to learn to catch your thinking. When your mind begins spinning out of control and you go, but then, and then, and then, say, stop. What is really happening? I will focus on this. If you teach your kids this through modeling this behavior, they will be mentally and emotionally healthier throughout their lives and more productive because they're not wasting energy on useless thoughts driven by fear. And instead, they're focusing on reality. Next, and the one that maybe has even the greatest and most long-lasting effect, find your sense of meaning and purpose. When people know how much they matter to their family, to their loved ones, and to their communities, then they can handle almost anything that comes their way because they have a real sense of purpose. You know, we spend so much time thinking about what we can't do now during these times that we sometimes lose the opportunity to think about what we should be doing. And what we should be doing is supporting other human beings. We should be working for justice. We should be caring about the vulnerable. We should be taking advantage of our blessings and choosing how to share them. And there are an abundant opportunities for us and for our children to be doing this, right? Just as the elderly are more vulnerable now, this is the opportunity to protect the vulnerable. If the woman across the street isn't able to go shopping as she used to, this is our chance for our kids to take care of her. If there's someone in the classroom who is having a harder time learning with hybrid learning or with all virtual learning, this is an opportunity for our kids who are getting by to support their friends. And in so doing, we begin to own this lesson. And the lesson says, I matter. And you know what else happens? What happens is when you learn that you matter, you also learn how good it feels to help another human being. Why does that matter so much? Because in the worst of times, the person who survives is the person who can reach to another human being and say, brother, I need a hand. If I can reach and say, I need somebody, then I'm going to make it. But what is it that allows me to reach? What allows me to reach is feeling like there's no pity on the other end. If I think there's pity on the other end, I'm not reaching because I'm going to be ashamed. But if I've given to someone who needed services, to someone who was vulnerable, and I've given, I've learned a critical lesson of humanity, which is that it feels good to give. And if I learn that lesson during these times, then it means that ultimately when it's my time to receive, I can receive without shame, without stigma, without worried about that other person pitying me, because I know how much it feels good to give. I know who I'm talking to. I want to thank all of you for your service. I've been working with and supporting military families since about 2006, primarily through the Military Child Education Coalition, as well as Boys and Girls Clubs of America. I know who I'm talking to. You are the people who understand contribution. You are the people who are willing to sacrifice for the greater good of our nation and of our communities. This is an opportunity during these very uncertain times for your children to also learn that lesson. And this brings me to a final point, really, which is there's this other thing that makes me kind of happy about this time, which is that this is an opportunity for young people, or really not young people, for our society to have an adjustment about who our heroes are. Go back far in history, and by that I mean February of 2020, right? And who are our heroes? Our heroes were the great sports stars and the very wealthy people and the great actors and actresses, and they're cool and everything. But when those are our heroes, then a lot of young people wonder whether they can ever become a hero themselves or have really value or worth themselves. And this is a real opportunity to redefine the very definition, the essence of heroism. Teachers, frontline workers, healthcare workers, military families. These are our real heroes. And if we as society have the ability to adjust to understand that, then every one of our kids suddenly can grow up and realize that they can be a hero. Because a hero is someone who serves another person and lifts them up as a matter of humanity. Thank you.